Welcome. Wow, I'm good and loud. Welcome to those of you who are not members of Mount Cross. We're happy to have you join us today. Those of you who are members at Mount Cross, nice to see you back this afternoon. We are happy to have the opportunity to talk about something that some of us have had experience with family members or perhaps within our own lives. And it shouldn't any longer have to be something that we can't talk about. So this is a topic that came to Mount Cross as something we wanted to explore last August. We have what's called a Health and Healing Sunday. And on that Sunday, we also distribute a list of many somewhat health-related or medically related topics. And we ask our congregation, we keep them in the church, to mark those things that they think they'd most be interested in learning more about. And then the topics that get the most votes become something that we try to pursue with something where we can either share more information, or in cases like this, find somebody who can come tell us more about it. And so Alzheimer's dementia was one of those things that got a lot of check marks. So you and others, I'm sure beyond those of us present, have an interest because we've had family members, because we worry about people in our own current circle or about ourselves. So thank you for being here. We are happy to have somebody who's very knowledgeable about that to speak with us today. And we have got somebody who's going to first share us an introduction to your speaker today, and that's Terry Helton, who's one of our comrades in all of these good things, and she's here from the Episcopal Church, who's a partner church with Mount Cross. So Terry, if you'd like to make that introduction.
It is always a pleasure to be here at Mount Cross and be with my extended family. So thank you for allowing me to be here. And I will say that this is much closer to my heart than I ever thought it would be. This talk on Alzheimer's. On February 27th, my sister died. And she had diabetes, and she had developed dementia from the diabetes. And we'll learn a little more about that from Jordana. But I had urged my brother-in-law to reach out to the Alzheimer's Association for support. And it wasn't till towards the very end that he did that. And now he is singing the Alzheimer's Association praise. So it's an interesting thing. Let me introduce Jordana so we don't delay any time here. So Jordana Lawrence is the Program and Education Manager of the California Central Coast Chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. Her work focuses on educating the public and supporting families affected by Alzheimer's and other dementias. Lawrence is based in Ventura, California, and covers the counties of Ventura and southern Santa Barbara. And somewhat into LA? Kern County and San Luis Obispo. By the way, this has happened because of cutbacks, just like everywhere else. So her area got extended. And she's only one, I hate to say little person, but she is. Her career highlights, though, led her here. Decades of service. Before officially joining Alzheimer's Association, she served as a volunteer support group facilitator for nearly 8 years. She became a formal staff member as an educator and care specialist in 2017. She has years of service. She was promoted to Program and Education Manager for the Central Coast Chapter in 2024, overseeing all education and care specialist functions. She is a professional before this. Her prior work was with the association. Before the association, she had a career in business and teaching. She taught students from preschool through high school in Ojai and Santa Barbara. And her commitment to helping families face dementia is motivated by her own mother's experience with the disease. Her mother died in 2008, inspiring Jordana to help others on their dementia journey. And it is my pleasure to introduce her and to say that she is really a good friend. Thank you. I'm also going to add in there were 3x5 cards that were given to you this time. Yes? Maybe? So when she's with her presentation, I will be glad to come and get those, and we can ask the questions with the microphone. We need to do it that way, or even raising your hands if that happens, because this is being videotaped so it can go on the website.
And then that way you can get your questions answered sooner rather than later, because I don't mind having questions when I'm giving my presentation, because goodness knows if we wait to the very end, sometimes there's not enough time to answer the questions, and this might be something that you really want to know too. So as you see, I came from a personal experience where my mother had which is being more common, called mixed dementia. So that means she had more than one. My mom had a form of Alzheimer's, she had vascular dementia, and she had frontal temporal lobe dementia. What is interesting is that back in the day, and I call it the dark ages, because prior to really the last 5 years, there really hadn't been a lot of movement within dementia. We didn't know a lot about it. Doctors weren't really talking about it. Families were having to deal with kind of making guesses, because back then, the true way of being able to diagnose someone with dementia was through an autopsy. Now, within the last couple of years, we have come so far. We now have a blood test that can determine Alzheimer's. That's only a year old. We have medication that can slow the progression. That's 2 years old. So we have definitely come further with Alzheimer's. Unfortunately, we're slow into frontal temporal lobe and vascular dementia and Lewy body dementia, which are the 4 top dementias that we deal with. Alzheimer's being number 1, about 84% of people who have dementia have Alzheimer's. But what we're finding, and I was just on a webinar which was fascinating, because it was actually 2 women whose mother had Alzheimer's, but after she had passed, the daughters decided that they were going to do an autopsy. And when they did the autopsy, they actually found out that her mother had 3 different types of dementia, and that they're finding that that is more and more the norm. So it is so important to be able to get an early diagnosis so that you can find out, especially with having the medication to slow the progression with Alzheimer's, because it has to be diagnosed as Alzheimer's. It has to be in the early stages, otherwise it's not eligible. So getting that diagnosis, really important. And it allows time and conversation to happen. Because one of the things that we have a problem with is having the discussion of life and death. And we don't like to talk about that, so therefore we don't get ready. And when we're talking about that is the medical power of attorney, which really keeps surprising me that it's only 25% of Americans that actually have that done. And it's been pushed by ER doctors and so forth that people over the age of 18 should start having their medical power of attorney. By doing that, you're allowing yourself to participate in your own care. And with dementia, because it tends to slowly rob of memories and being able to communicate, so important to have that discussion early on. And most of the time, people are not diagnosed in the 1st or 2nd stage. They're in the 3rd or 4th stage. So getting that, having that choice and that what do I think about it? It's more of being able to have that control. You still want to have some kind of control over your life, have some kind of say in how you want to do things, and it's really important to have that. Especially with now getting the blood test, which can only really denote Alzheimer's, but that's okay, because if it turns out to be negative, then we can look to see what else there might be. We know that symptoms could be very similar, but until you actually get that diagnosis or have those tests, you're not sure, because it could be something else. It could be a vitamin B12 deficiency. And depending on how old you are, women, it could be menopause, because we have memory issues when we start hitting menopause. You know, I was hitting menopause early, perimenopause, when my mom was really starting to show signs, because my mom's dementia started in her late 50s, early 60s. And she passed away at 78. So she actually lasted longer, because with frontal temporal lobe, the life expectancy is about 6 to 8 years, well, 6 years. Yeah, 6 to 8 years. Vascular dementia is 5 years. Lewy body dementia is 6 years. So really understanding what you're up against can help. And maybe picking up on those clues. So let's talk about clues. How many of us have lost our keys at some point or another? Oh, yes. Very good. But we were able to find them. We were able to retrace our steps. Somebody with dementia cannot retrace their steps. They'll come out of a room with their keys in their hands and they go, oh, I forgot to get something in the other room. They'll put the keys down, they'll walk back into the other room, they'll come back and they'll have no memory that they've put their keys down on the dining room table. That's a symptom. Finding the keys in the freezer would also be a symptom, okay? I just had somebody ask me, was starting to get worried about their sister who was showing signs. And she lives in Ventura. She drove to Ojai to visit her friend who she's visited for 30 years in Ojai, but got lost going there and got lost coming home. Now, she's already been diagnosed, but those are kind of little things that can give you a clue as to that. Sometimes it's just simply knowing your loved one and saying, wait a minute, something's not right here. And then it's a matter of going and then getting the doctor to do the tests. And your regular GP can do it. They have the accessibility to the blood tests, PET scans, MRIs, things that you need. They have access to that. In fact, Santa Barbara, the neurologists up there are trying to get the GPs to do more of the diagnostic because they are so busy, they don't have time. And to get in to see a neurologist can be anywhere from 6 months to a year. That's a lot of time, whereas if your doctor can do the test, and frankly, your doctor should have been starting to do memory tests on you at the age of 50. That was passed a couple of years ago, where part of the physical, your yearly physical, was to have your memory test. But doctors were waiting for their patients to say, hey, doc, I need to have, let's start doing this so that we have a baseline. And then the patients are waiting for the doctor to do it. Well, my doctor was ahead of it because I was in my early 50s when I realized, it's like, wait a minute, why is he asking me those questions? And it took me, he's testing my memory. Wasn't even aware of it. But boy, I figured it out. It's like, okay, fine, now I have a baseline. So if something starts to happen, then I can go back to my doctor and say, okay, each time I've seen you, I know you're marking how my memory is. Where am I? Because it is a little scary, because I remember one time going with my mom to the neurologist, and in the early stages, people with dementia can fool anybody. They can pull themselves together. And my mother did that, man. She passed every memory test the doctor gave her. I failed, because of course I was sitting behind her, and I was taking the tests along with my mother. She passed everything, I didn't. And then that started getting me worried. And then the doctor just kind of leaned over and looked at me and was like, what is she doing here? Right? And then we get outside the doctor's office, and we're not even 2 feet from the doctor's office, and my mom turns to me and says, where am I? What am I doing? And when am I going home? And I just looked at her and I thought, you couldn't have done this 10 minutes ago. How much easier would that have been had the doctor seen that component, right? To make a better diagnosis and so forth. So when I'm talking with families, I tell them, make a list. When you start seeing problems, you start keeping a record so that when they're going to the doctor, you can email the doctor and say, this is what I'm seeing. Can you check on this? We have concerns. Because different dementias, because of what I said earlier, means that it slows the progression, the life expectancy. But if it's already a couple of months ahead or a couple of years ahead, you've just shut down some of those years of where you can really make a difference. Now, what we're finding out, which is good news, we have every year the Alzheimer's Association has an international conference where everybody in the world comes together. Last year it was in Toronto. This year it's going to be in London, England, where all the people involved in research and the neurologists, they all come together and they all tell what has been happening. Interesting enough, we had the US Pointer study, which was a 2-year study all about exercise, diet, and using your brain. And they had 2 different groups. One group was highly structured, went to the doctors, had MRIs, was tested, oversaw their diet, made sure they were staying on target. Fast improvement. It delayed or slowed the progression by up to almost 40%. That's amazing. That's just on diet, exercise, and using your brain. But let's talk about how we use our brain, because we're so used to doing the things we like. So people say to me, well, what if I do crossword puzzles? And my question would be, how long have you been doing a crossword puzzle? Oh, well, my whole life. And I said, sorry, that doesn't count. You have to truly challenge your brain. Learn a new language, learn a new musical instrument. If you've never cooked, start cooking. It's truly, and for most of us, just using our computers can really challenge our brains half the time anyway, because that's how it was for me. I really began to understand what they were talking about because when I started this job, as Terry said, my background was in teaching, in retail management. I was busy doing that. And all of a sudden, I'm working for a nonprofit organization where I had to learn an entirely new computer system. I was overseeing support groups. I was doing consultations with families and having to document and input and all this kind of stuff. Sometimes I feel like my brain was going to explode. But after a year, I started remembering more. And it wasn't just how I was remembering at work. It was also things that I was remembering from past and things I needed to remember in my private life that I started seeing improvements. And I was like, oh, now I get it. You really do have to challenge. And it's never too late because in the Pointer study, we had people from their 50s all the way into their 80s. And there was still a significant change. So it's really never too late to do it. And that's where that hope finally comes in, right? Because when my mom was going through, there wasn't a lot. We weren't hearing a lot. We weren't finding out a lot. Families were just kind of left to drift. That's not happening anymore. Ventura County has so much to offer to help families. It's a matter of being able to access it, right? And to be able to know that it's out there. Because one of the things about dementia is that it's a very isolating disease. How many of you are actually dealing with someone in your life with dementia? That's a lot. So in Ventura County, just Alzheimer's, is the 3rd leading cause of death. In California, it's about 5th or 6th. In the United States, it's the 6th. How many families are dealing with this that are not getting the help that they need or don't even know it? So things are going to change. They're definitely going to get better. There's more opportunities. The GUIDE program, which is what is being offered at CMH, which is through Medicare. They're trying this pilot program, and CMH is one of the people that got accepted to be part of this pilot, which is to help families deal with caregiving, where they get respite time and they can really begin to get the help that they need without a lot of cost. Because as I'm sure most of you know, Dementia is one of the most expensive illnesses that you can have. So getting ready and understanding makes a big difference. Does anyone have a question? Okay. Yeah.
Right, what is the best way to help when they are dealing with frustration?
Okay, good question. One of the hardest things for families is to realize that they are the ones that have to change. That the person with dementia can't change anymore because they're already dealing with a life-threatening illness. And that's how you kind of have to look at it, is that it is a terminal illness. So when you're dealing with someone who has dementia that is frustrated, you almost have to step back and say, okay, what led up to that frustration? Was it me because they've been asking a question 10,000 times? And I finally said, oh my God, I told you it's at 12 noon. Now, the thing is, they may not understand what was said, but boy, do they understand the tone in which it's being said. So what you have to do is you have to back up, take a deep breath, and then start again. Because they're gonna, you're gonna start off here, right? You're having this conversation and all of a sudden it's escalating. And it's like, okay, what's going on here? It's really up to us as the family member to step back and say, okay, what are we doing that's causing this? It's like, I remember one time I called my dad to see how things were going, and he was just so upset. He and my mom had had this huge fight, and my mom had left and came back about 20 minutes later, completely forgetting they'd had the fight. My father was still upset, and my mom noticed that he was upset and said, well, honey, what's wrong? And my dad started the fight all over again. And it was like, Dad, she had forgotten. You need to just let it go. And then, of course, he starts arguing with me, and it's like, no, this is a no-win situation. Because you aren't going to win, because they are not going to be able to retain that memory. If you look at it from the standpoint of them, it's that all I've asked is a question. Why are they getting mad at me? I just asked this question once. Because in their mind, it has only been once. To us, we know it's not, but it's really up to us to make those changes. The other thing is, too, people with dementia in the early stages and pretty much throughout, they become light sensitive, sound sensitive. There's a depth perception. So if you have stairs in the house, they may not see that first step. So marking it somehow so that it stands out, or if you have a bathroom where you have white walls and a white toilet, they may not see the toilet. So therefore, they're not going to realize that's the bathroom. So if they really have to go to the bathroom, they're going to be, and then accidents happen. So if you can change the wall color, put a colorful toilet seat on your toilet, and then night lights, because that helps. Because people with dementia at night, things get reversed. Night becomes day, day becomes night. We just had a time change, right? And most people don't like that time change because they lost. But for people with dementia, this is a better time change for them because it stays lighter later. And it doesn't have that sundowning effect. Not that they may still do sundowning, but it doesn't start as early because it doesn't get as dark as early.
So for repeated questions, can you hear me? Is this working? This I do know that if, say, you're going to take somebody for a ride to the doctor, and you could write it out so that they would, instead of asking you every minute, where are we going? What are we doing? If you put it on a piece of paper that's clearly printed and probably in some good size printing that says we're on our way to the doctor. They ask that question, you show them the paper, they now have the answer. They are able to read for a long time into the diagnoses.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay. Oh, there's two, one back there and one up front.
When it comes to being a caregiver of someone, when it comes to being a caregiver of someone with Alzheimer's, does it help to put a structure to their week and daily activities?
Good question. Absolutely. People with dementia need to have that structure. So if breakfast is at 7, lunch is at noon, dinner's at 5, bed's at 7. If you deviate from that, it can really throw them off. So keeping that structure can really help, but it's hard. You know, families have to make that adjustment, and they stick to it. It can really make a difference, because people going through the stages, they have anxiety. You know, they're not sure what's happening. You know, they're beginning not to recognize, you know, their space that they may have lived in for 30 years. Having that structure gives them a sense of safety and security. And this lady had a question.
Okay. What's the difference between an advanced care directive and a medical power of attorney?
You know what, Terry's the better one to ask that.
A medical power of attorney is say it again, Pina. Advanced healthcare directive is basically the same thing as a medical power of attorney. What you're doing is assigning somebody to make decisions for you when you become unable to make medical decisions for yourself. It's better to have it in writing and to have that witness by 2 witnesses or notarized as a legal document. However, there needs to be a conversation, and it should be with all parties who would be interested and involved, so that there's no surprise.
To elaborate a little bit on that too, is that having that discussion makes things a lot easier, that as the person with dementia is no longer able to talk about what they want, we already know. In my mother's case, 3 months before she died, we found out she had 4th stage oral cancer. Highly aggressive, only about a 30% survival rate, you know, and at this point, my mom was already in advanced dementia. She already had 3, so technically she had 4 terminal illnesses. You know, what we did do is we did 1 round of radiation because the tumor was on the inside of her mouth, and God love my mother, to the very end, she loved to eat. So we didn't want to take that away from her, so we did 1 round, and that proved to be too much. She couldn't remember why she was going to the radiation treatment. She couldn't understand why she was being strapped down, you know, because radiation's very specific. It has to hit certain spots. So you are you're down. So we decided the doctor wanted to do another treatment of it, and we said no. We just said, let's make her comfortable. Let's make her, you know, no pain, no stress, and that's what we did, you know, and frankly, that's what she wanted. My mom never wanted it to go as long as it did. So this way, it was quick and relatively pain-free. So, any?
To step back on your explanation about the correlation with diet, exercise, and learning, specifically to diet, is there a lot of studies being done currently, and what are good resources to see what are
So it was the MIND diet that was part of it, which has a lot to do with the Mediterranean diet. So it's a matter of you know, what are we hearing? Fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, take away the processed foods, alcohol, that type of thing, not so much, you know, because we are seeing a correlation, right? Thank you. Between all of that. So, and in my mother's case, in full disclosure, my mom had a drug and alcohol problem. So besides having massive head trauma, The drugs and alcohol, we know, participated in her having dementia, because there was no dementia in my mom's family history. We're not 100% sure about that, because most of my mom's relatives didn't live past 50, so we're not 100% sure about that, but we do know that my mom had a lot of head trauma. You're more susceptible to dementia with that, and drugs and alcohol can also play. We're beginning to see more of a correlation between that as well. So diet is playing a big part, exercise, and in doing all of that, it's also going to be good for your heart. It's going to be good for, a lot of stuff. What I found interesting through my journey, and I'm always reading everything I can, is that 20% of what we eat goes to feed our brain. So if you're having McDonald's, pizzas, and stuff, 20% of all of that is going up into your brain. That's what's helping to feed it. So you may want to think about that the next time you have a pizza. It's not to say that you can't have it once in a while. It just can't be a staple in a diet. You have to kind of start pushing yourself to think more strategically about the quality of your life. Because for me, it is not the quantity, it's the quality. And that's kind of how my parents brought us up, is that's what's important. And my mom was a huge advocate on health and exercise. So this was something that was very prevalent. My mom was doing jazzercise into her early 70s until she broke her hip a couple of times, and then that kind of did it. But it also exacerbated the dementia, because people who have dementia, anytime they have a shock, if they break something, if someone dies unexpectedly, if they have to have some kind of surgery, it can jumpstart the dementia into the next stage. So understanding those components can help you when you're trying to navigate how do we move forward with the care, understanding what we're up against. We, at the Alzheimer's Association, we have support groups throughout Ventura County to help families, and I'm always surprised. What's interesting is, on par, we've been doing about 3,300 plus in 2024, but our volume dropped to 3,200, and it's like, yeah, I know. I thought that was kind of weird too. Because support groups are a great way to get information, to find out more about what's available in your community, to find out what grants are available, what resources are available, because at some point, there's hard decisions that have to be made. It's whether to keep somebody at home throughout the illness, but you have to figure out what the financial component, because a year or two ago, it was $30,000 for a month for 24-hour care, 7 days a week. Whereas you've placed somebody with dementia, it could be anywhere from $7,000 to $11,000 or $12,000 a month. That's a huge difference. And it talks about, where you talked about the scheduling, it's hard at home, but in places and facilities, being on that schedule, they have to be on a schedule. So that helps people with dementia to kind of ease into things, and it gives them a quality of life that sometimes they may not have. Because I was always surprised that through each stage with my mom, like moving from the place where they lived for about 10 years, they moved into a retirement community because my parents were living in a 3-story condo, and my mom kept falling down the stairs. And of course, there was one really bad fall, and my dad said, "We're done, we're out of here." And they moved into a retirement community that had assisted living and memory care. So my parents were able to stay together, and then my mom was in exercise class, and she fell and she broke her hip again. And then they told us, "No, I'm sorry, she can't go back and stay with, your dad." And it's like, okay, well, I thought she was going to have trouble moving into the assisted living because it was more of a hospital atmosphere and a little bit more sterile, and my dad wasn't going to be there. My mom did just fine. It was interesting. And I think part of it is that my dad was maybe just a little bit of the problem. Kind of hovering, kind of not, getting tired of things, So she kind of got the break. So, it's not always a bad thing, but it's a matter of trying to figure out of what's best, And my mom, I think she kind of liked being allowed to just be, because families have expectations. And we always compare our loved ones as to how they were instead of how they are. And it's really important to think about how they are, because you as caregivers are the ones responsible for their care. And if you're thinking about them in the past, how are they going to get the care they need now? So it's really important because they're not able to verbalize it. I always say you have to become, the other aspect of it too is you have to become what I call the medical detective, because there'll come a point in time when they're not going to be able to verbalize that they're not feeling good. And people with dementia are much more prone to urinary tract infections. They have problems with their eyes. So it's important for us to be able to really look at them and say, okay, are they doing all right? Because if they have a urinary tract infection, oh my God, that can send the dementia through the roof. And then of course you get them the antibiotics, they come right down, they settle down, they're okay. But you gotta know it. And sometimes families have had to, get the loved one hospitalized because it's gotten so bad because they hadn't let anyone know that they were having trouble. So what you would do is CVS, Rite Aid, places like that will have strips that you can test the urine to see that, because it's really hard to, pardon the expression, to pee into that cup, and somebody with dementia is going to have a hard time doing that. So let's do something to help them along, and by doing the strip, that can make it a lot easier. You can call the doctor, you can say this is what we found, they'll give the antibiotics, and then you're off and running, because it's not easy. I remember one time going to visit my mom. This was towards the end too. I hadn't seen her, I'd been sick, so I knew they wouldn't let me up into the place. And I don't know, I just saw her and it's just like, something's not right. And my dad had stayed out to talk to the nurse, so I walked out and I said, what's wrong with Mom? And he goes, what are you talking about? How can you tell? She's not doing anything. And I said, okay, Dad, something's not right. So I turned to the nurse and I said, when was the last time the doctor had seen my mom? Well, she said the nurse practitioner was just here. That's not what I asked. I asked when the doctor was here. And of course she got snippy with me. And it's like, well, you have to call the doctor. It's like, fine, Dad, let's go. We went back, we called the doctor. My mom's kidneys were shutting down. So really being aware of what's happening is really important. But the other thing is to understand how the progression works. Because one of the things that we weren't told is that her kidneys were shutting down because my mom was beginning to make that final journey. And that when kidneys shut down, it suppresses pain. You hydrate, it sent her pain through the roof. So then we're having to do double duty because we're having to take care of the pain, plus my mom was already beginning to make that final descent, where she should have been able to do it in peace and quiet. Had the doctor been a little bit more upfront, because you can tell I'm still a little ticked off at him, and it's been how many years? But we didn't know. But that's one of the reasons why I do this, is to give you guys the information to be able to question. Don't ever hesitate to ask the doctor questions. Remember, you are paying for his services. You have a right to say, no, wait a minute. First off, slow down. Second, speak in layman's terms so that I can actually understand what you're saying. And then tell me again. Because I want to understand. I want to be able to give the care I can give, or even for myself too. Also look at the after summary, that you get from your doctor when you see him. Always check there, because doctors will put more information down because they go back later and they type in things that they didn't get a chance to do originally. I can't tell you how many times I've gone and looked over my stuff and said, oh, I don't remember the doctor saying that. But that's just one more information to help you. The more information you have, the more you're empowered. The more education you have, the more empowered to be able to take care of yourself and everyone else. because you have to remember as a caregiver too, you have to take care of yourself. You have to put yourself into the mix of things. And you have to be honest about what you're up against so that you can get the proper care. So,
And are there any cards with questions?
and do we want to move on?
And then we can move.
I'm just curious as to whether or not you've ever heard of the app Brain HQ. There's been a good bit of news about it in the New Yorker just had an article on it.
I haven't heard too much of it. I think it's still very preliminary, but they're finding out all sorts of stuff. And I think that as we go on, we're going to find out a lot more. People like, for instance, Bruce Willis with frontal temporal lobe, that's putting a major focus on it. We know that there's a gene, the APO4. Thank you. And if you have that gene, that brings it more susceptible to dementia. And if you have both genes, then it's even more so. It's not a guarantee that that's what's going to happen. It just means that you're more susceptible and likely.
How are stages determined? You said there's stages 1, 2, and 3.
So originally, there are 7 stages to dementia. The only one that doesn't necessarily have stages is Lewy body dementia, because Lewy body is one of your more difficult type of dementias, and therefore there's problems from the get-go. So they don't have stages when you're working with Lewy body. The others are 7 stages, but within the last couple of months, I have been hearing that they are now changing that trajectory, and they're kind of firming it up into different types of stages, less than the 7 stages. But for the most part, there's 7 stages. And each stage kind of has its own type of symptoms. And then that can give you an idea of where you are. You can find it online. We have them at the Alzheimer's Association, so I can send them if anybody's interested. I can give you my business card and you can email me and I can send it right to you. Because it does help. It's what helped me when I was going through this, because in the beginning, my family was very much in denial about what was happening with my mom. And when I would tell my brothers that I think that I swear to God, I think mom's got Alzheimer's. And my brothers would not believe me. They'd go see her. My mom would be on top of it. My brothers would call me, I don't know what you're talking about. Mom seems just fine. And it's like, oh my God, how much time did you actually spend with her? And they would always say, well, how can you tell? Because my mom was on the prescription drugs. And it's like, I'm sorry, there's a huge difference. If you're paying attention, you can see those differences.
Actually, this is a good point to break and ask Susan Prosser. Oh,
Yeah.
one more question?
I just had a comment that stages are never linear. It's not one step at a time. They might be mild, moderate, moderate, mild. So don't think it's going to be so clear-cut.
Well, and there's that saying, if you know one person with Alzheimer's, you know one person. One of the things that's been difficult sometimes is that there is a real disconnect with people from the neck down versus the neck up. And the brain is a very unique organ, and it's what makes everything in the body function. If you do not have a working brain, then there's going to be problems with the body. And a way to think about it is we can have a heart transplant, we could have a liver, kidney, now a bladder, lungs. You can't transplant the brain.
Intestine, you can't have
Yeah.
a brain transplant.
So those 2 things, unique to the individual. So that's why understanding how it works is really important, because it's what's going to make everything else not work to its top way it can.
So we're briefly discuss something at your beginning, and this question is based on that, and I think we do need to discuss a little more, so thank you. Somebody's been diagnosed with dementia, then started with a balance issue, and it turned out he had an NPH. What's the NPH stand for? Normal pressure hydrocephalus. And so she had a shunt put in, and she's doing better, less confusion, etc., and that this is a misdiagnosis for dementia. You mentioned vitamin B12, there's alcoholism, there's actually depression when people are not treated for depression accurately, and that is a misnomer for older adults. They really need to be assessed for depression because they may not have dementia, it may actually be depression, and they can be treated. So any others, Jordana?
Not in the way of being that, but that's why it's so important to get diagnosed and get diagnosed early. Because yours, how much time did you go before you finally got the diagnosis? Yeah, I mean, that's just, and I think part of it is fear, part of it is a stigma. And right now the association is kind of shifting gears, and we're starting to want to help younger generations because there's a misnomer that it's a, well, how do I say this? It's kind of a balancing act, right? We think it's because it's old age, and age is the #1 precursor for dementia, there's no doubt about it. But I just read an article that was out of England that a gentleman was the youngest person to die of dementia, and he was 25. Diagnosed at 22 and died at 25. So to think that it is an older person's dementia is kind of a misnomer, and that's why we're trying to hit the younger generations, because diet and exercise is playing such a big part in using your brain. You know, it's so difficult, right? And it's getting harder of us using our brain because of AI, because of computers, because everything is just so easy. We're not, they talked about, how many remember the maps that we used to keep, the Thomas guides, right? Okay, well, that used a certain part of our brain, which is now not being used because we're not using the maps. Right? So what is that doing to that part of our brain that we're not using? So that's why trying something new is making inroads, right? You're going to start pushing things to make that work.
I just wanted to make a comment that when you're talking about diet, exercise, and above the brain, below the neck, that we have so much diabetes or type 2 in our society, and I was surprised myself that I never equated that it's a vascular disease, and so's your brain. So it's not just your heart and your blood, that having those illnesses can affect your brain and lead to dementia.
Anything that affects the heart affects the brain. And if we're doing our circulatory system, I'm a nurse, by the way, didn't say that. It affects your whole being, especially your brain and your heart. I recently had gone through diagnoses because of I fainted, and Tim found me on the floor back in December after passing out. So I went through some tests, and I had my carotids read, and knowing my family history, and when it came back with mild, I felt like I was walking on air. I went, how is this possible? But I think it is diet, and I have tried to be active, but not near enough, right? So any of that, and you talked about the neurons being built, we call that neuroplasticity. In order for that to really be effective, you gotta add the exercise to it.
In fact, I just saw a thing online with Sylvester Stallone, who's going to be 80. And he was working out at the gym. He looked terrific. And it's just like, wow, so it's never too late to really start pushing yourself and to really, you got to get your doctor's orders. You got to make sure that you can do this. But even walking, instead of, when you're going grocery shopping or you're going shopping, you park at one place and then you walk to your stores. You don't just park in one place, then do one store, then get your car, go to another place. You need to get those steps in there. And that's a good way of getting them in there without feeling like you're exercising.
Okay, so Susan, come join us, or come join Jordana.
Yeah.
We get a very special opportunity that not many people have, and Susan approached this subject because, Susan, may I say it? Sure. Susan has been diagnosed with beginning of dementia. And so she really would like to have the conversation with Jordana, and there's some questions that are going to happen here. So, and there can be conversation during this, correct? Mm-hmm. So are you ready, ladies?
Sure.
And I'll stand ready with the microphone for questions, too.
All right, so the first question is, what are the benefits of an early diagnosis?
I thought you were going to say, what are the benefits? I was going to say,
No.
maybe you don't remember the bad part of the day. Right? Well, the benefits of an early diagnosis is that you can quit wondering, because there's a lot of things that might go through your brain about, oh my God, is it this, is it that, is it whatever. So sometimes when you can put a name to something, there's a certain comfort in that, and that's all kinds of things that could be wrong with you, so it's not unique to this. And as I stand here today, and I'm grateful for all the things I can do, I've imposed some limitations on myself without waiting for someone else to have to say that. So believe me, you don't have to worry, I'm not driving on any freeways. I only have little routes that I use to just certain paths that I allow myself to drive, and that's known by doctors and my husband, and we'll continue to monitor that. But I've set some limitations, and so I'm comfortable with what I am doing, but it hasn't forced me to wait to the point where I couldn't do any of it. So knowing early on and making the most of what I can do makes me feel good about knowing where I'm at and taking advantage of every day or the days I've got, making plans with my adult children, their families and my grandchildren, with things with my husband, with getting to do. I love church work, as people who know me know. It's almost an addiction. And so, look at my friend Gail laugh. And so, let me do the things. I'm sorry, I'm told to get this up higher. So let me enjoy that while I've got something to offer. So there's an advantage to know that, I can't say, oh, I'm going to put that off. I want to do something else now, and I'll do that later when I'm yet older. So, yeah, I don't mind knowing that there may come a limit to that. And it won't be death. It'll be something sooner than death. But, yeah, let's do what we can now.
Did you know for a while before you were diagnosed? I mean, were you suspicious that there was something not quite right?
I had to force the issue with doctors. And I had both a mother and a mother-in-law with some years back, so it wasn't as clearly identified, it wasn't labeled, and everybody all said, oh, yes, yes. But one of whom died with it, the other who died of it. And, they didn't have the level of medical attention that you would see now. So I didn't immediately believe that because my mother, she was the one that died with it, not the one that died of it, but I was close in proximity to my mother-in-law that died.
Can you explain the difference between with it and of it?
Yes, my mother-in-law had gotten to a point where roaming was a concern, so she was living in a lovely facility, but it was a locked facility so that roaming didn't take her out of the confines of this wonderful, comfortable area where she had a lovely room, but a common eating area and some activities. But, you know, she would not be able to have gone to the main doorway and get out. And she's the one that was, after eating a meal, had gone to a comfortable chair, and someone came to see if she wanted to join an activity, and they thought she had fallen asleep. Well, instead, it was a permanent sleep. And so she hadn't called out in pain or anything. So who wouldn't want that to be the way to die? My mother-in-law, who died of it, took, unfortunately, what this could be all the way to the end. And for a final stretch, there was, unfortunately, she had to be strapped down, and there was a lot of screaming. That's the worst of what it can be. So my husband and I, our sons, as they grew from elementary school to college age, have lived and witnessed that, so we're not unfamiliar with what it can be.
Great. All right. So did your family see the symptoms before you got diagnosed?
Yes, because when sharing the information as we got more medical testing and responses, and then sharing it with, neither of my adult sons live here in Ventura County, but when one was present, who'd come to help my husband with some home repair projects, and I was in the family room, and I guess he walked by, and I said, "Oh, Jeffrey, you're here." And he goes, "Well, I've been here all day." And I said, "Oh." He said, "Well, I thought you knew that, Mom," or something like that. We have those kind of interactions where I guess I'd probably talked to him earlier in the day and forgotten. Yeah.
And how was it going through the process of the diagnosis, the stages that you had to go through before you got the proper diagnosis?
This is where I had to force the issue. When you go for the annual physical, and I don't know if your doctors do the same thing, maybe they all do, they have this little list of things that they ask you, and usually at the beginning, they, at least at the doctor I go to, and he had his assistant doing this, where they show you 3 things, and then they say, "I'm going to ask you about this later." And I didn't want to get the assistant in trouble, but when she showed me this, now roughly a year ago, showed me these 3 things, and she set them just on the counter, not out of my view. So when she got to the final question and she asked me, I just said the names of the 3 things I could see. But would I have remembered them? No. And were there other things that as we went through, I just eked through it, and it was only because I was looking at the 3 things and could answer that question that I wasn't immediately, showing to be of some trouble. And so when the doctor came in, he was looking over it, and, they did everything else that would otherwise have been done that day as for that part of the physical. I said, "Listen, there's this problem." And so he did order a particular type of brain scan. That was the first of the ones that was done. And that one did result in finding amyloids. That's something, if you've looked into any of this or anything, that does show some concern in the brain. And so he did start me on some medication that's commonly used for this type of issue. Then I went from there to somebody who was a well-regarded specialist that I've been told about. Well, it took 5-6 months to get that appointment. So in the meantime, I just took the one from my GP. And then that doctor ordered 2 other types of brain scans, and then a session with a neuropsychologist. So that whole process has just ended last week with the final 17-page report from the neuropsychologist. But that doctor right off the bat added another medicine. I personally could not tolerate. They wanted me to start with 1 pill, then 2, then 3, then 4, and I finally had to call and say, I don't even care if I die sooner. I can't take this medicine in addition to the other. So I said, I'm not going to go to 4. I can't stand 3. I'll try 2. I'm taking 2, thinking about going to 1. Because I found myself just too doped up. And, so I think it's important to have a voice in how medicated you want to be. But, yeah, some of the things you're starting to talk about, my 17-page report tells me what lobe sections, they've done so much scanning and all of that I know what lobes are involved and all of that kind of stuff. And it's multiple. There were brain bleeds that I have a vascular type, and I've got a couple of different lobal sections. And yeah, but I'm grateful. I think other than saying a lot of things over and over again or asking the same questions, I guess I'll have to ask tolerance from family and friends. A lot of life goes on. So
That's great. Is there any questions?
People might be interested, Susan, in knowing what were the symptoms that made you concerned. Can you remember that?
Way back to the very beginning, I did have a very brief period, and it didn't last the duration, where it scared the heck out of me. I went for, I think it was only a few weeks, where I felt the loss of both current and historical memory. And I think that must have been the brain bleeds. That would be my only thought, and that did scare me.
Did that get you to be more aggressive about getting a diagnosis?
Well, that was the early stuff, and then it ended, but that's when I started talking to my GP about it, yeah.
So was there forgetfulness in everyday, your short-term memory, was it being affected?
Well, everything was being affected when I had that stint of forgetting everything. And then what's happening now is that, when you're forgetting, you don't remember what you forgot sometimes. So we've had some things where recently we've had to buy this great big calendar and post it, because even appointments that I thought I had on a little calendar, I was starting to miss appointments for things with doctors or haircuts and things like that, even though I might look early in the week or even early on that day. It wasn't sticking here, so that when it came time in the day that, I better get in the car and get to that appointment, I was missing things.
That's very typical. Were you a bill payer in your home?
No, we take turns so that we keep up to date with, so that, if one of us dies, it wasn't that the other one always handled the finances or this or that. So over the years, we've taken, it's not always a fixed amount, but maybe, a couple of years, one will do it and then we'll flip and this and that. So it happened to be right now, my husband, who's now retired from law practice, was doing the bills right now anyway, so I don't think it'll ever come back to me.
This was one of the first symptoms for my sister, is the bills were being late, and they were getting fined for late bills, where she had done this for years. So that is one of the financial symptoms. It's rather a dangerous one. And to fall, you're even at bigger likelihood of falling for a scam.
Any other questions?
Hang on.
Just a minute, I can't hear you and I know they can't.
Susan, did your doctor give you any specific things that you could do to help you with your short-term memory, specific activities or anything like that?
The neuropsychologist, this 17-page report that I got, And she's wonderful. I've made a friend, and she's been so conscientious about everything. So in this 17 pages, and with the time she spent with me, she has made a point to say, not just that I want you to read, but I want you to do some things that I don't care for. But she says, I want you to do books on tape as well. And I said, but I love to read. But she says, you need to do both. So it's this notion of doing, I think you were alluding to some new things too. So if you like to read, you're now going to also, like every other book needs to be a book on tape, and then you can read the next book. And so there's some of those kinds of things that I think it alludes to what you were talking about.
It's using two different types in your
Right.
brain, because to listen to it, you have to process it different than when you're reading it.
Right. So there's some of that. I think they feel there's some potential for still exercising what I've got up here.
And that's something that we found because some of the people in the U.S. Pointers study did have dementia. And they found that doing the exercise and using your brain and the diet and everything did slow the progression of the illness. So, yeah, so that's really good.
So the reason I asked about the app, Brain HQ, the reason I asked about that, it is an app that specifically has brain exercises. And there's one specific one that's called the divided attention exercise that they have found, and there's actually quite a bit of science behind this particular app. They have found that particular exercise, and there must be at least 20 of them, but of that particular one to have reduced Alzheimer's by 25%.
That's amazing.
And I've been doing it for, my daughter-in-law said it, I've been doing it, and you really do see a difference as you use it. So this is good exercise for the brain.
Write it down for me, Becky, because you know I won't remember it.
Okay, she said to describe the exercise. That is not, that's not so easy. I wish I had a screen I could show you one of them, but for instance, the divided attention exercise, one of the divided attention exercises, it gives you all these instructions and gives you examples so you practice before you actually get into doing it yourself. But one of them, and this sounds so easy, but one of them, it will show you on the screen, it'll show you two vehicles, for instance. One is a covered van, one is a little car that looks, they're both gray, but one's van, one's a little car, so they look different. And then somewhere else on the screen, there will be a road sign, like Route 66 will flash on the screen. So what will happen next will be one of the two cars will flash on the screen, and at the same time, the road sign. So your attention is divided, right? You've got the two things, and those disappear, and then these circles come up, and you're to select where you saw which car you saw, and where you saw the road sign. And as it goes along, of course, they change, the position changes, they speed up, and as you progress through the different phases, different things happen. So anyway, that's just an example. There are many different exercises.
That was helpful. That was a great description.
Absolutely.
What was the app again?
It's Brain, B-R-A-I-N, and then capital H, capital Q. You get it on the App Store.
Oh, HQ.
I just wanted to add a little bit on your first question with Susan on the early diagnosis, because she mentioned later then about the different medications. But one of the things that we've learned is catching it early, there's also infusions. And that's what can help stop, it won't take you back, but it can help stop it.
It'll slow the progression.
Slow the progression.
So the infusion is that medication I was talking about that was 2 years ago. So it's lecanemab, and that does help to slow. And that's why it's important to get diagnosed with Alzheimer's, because it's only an Alzheimer's drug. And you will get infusion in probably up to 18 months. in doing that. And like you said, it doesn't repair the brain, so whatever damage has been done, it stays there, but it does slow the progression.
Just quick comment, I took a class origami for dementia, and the things they stressed were manual manipulation, reading out loud because it's bilateral, and simple math.
Simple math.
Not using the calculator, using our math.
Tie it, okay? We can tie this up. And I think I'll tie it up by giving a story of my favorite story about my mom. And that's when you're dealing with someone with dementia, sometimes I think you can feel like that you're slowly losing the personality, who they were, all that kind of stuff. But they're still there. And this story it shows my mom in two very different lights. One is that I went to visit her. I was living in Santa Barbara at the time. They were living in Pacific Palisades. So my mom was probably in her early, going into middle stages of dementia. And I noticed she wasn't wearing her wedding ring. So I said, Mom, what happened to your wedding ring? She goes, oh, I don't know. It's probably somewhere. And I thought, oh my God, the dementia, it's really beginning to take hold. Okay, we're really down this road. So a couple of months go by, I've been going back and forth, seeing her, still no wedding ring. And about 3 months later, I'm visiting again, and I noticed that my mom's still not wearing her wedding ring. So I said, Mom, did you ever find your wedding ring? She goes, oh, I know what happened to it. This time my father's in the room. And I said, oh, you do? What happened? She goes, yeah, your father and I had a fight. I got ticked off and I flushed it down the toilet. I turned to my father and I said, is this true? And he said, oh yeah, that's exactly what your mother did. And then my mother says, I bought the ring. I could do whatever I want with it. My mother's personality was still there because that is kind of who she was. And I think that when we're going down this journey, they're still there. They never go away. If you accept that, even though you may not see it, somewhere deep inside, they're still there. Thank you. Okay.
I'm actually not going to let you be through because we did talk about dementias, and I'm putting you on the spot. There is differences in how they can look like, correct? Yes. And we didn't really go over that at all. So can we do that a little bit?
Okay, so nowadays, luckily, we can really know that the technology has gotten to be so much better that we are able to figure out the difference between Alzheimer's and vascular dementia, Lewy body, frontal temporal lobe, what you had, all these different ways, because technology is there to help us to do that. But it's up to us to push the doctors like Susan had to do with really pushing and being able to say, no, I need an accurate diagnosis. Don't accept when the doctor says, oh yes, you have dementia. Because the word dementia is like the word cancer. It's an umbrella term. So that's too ambiguous, right? And especially now that we have medications to help with Alzheimer's, you need to know what you have. Now, each of them, like I had alluded earlier with Lewy body dementia, much more problematic. It tends to be more violent at times. They get more aggressive. That's something that that's why I have always said why you need a diagnosis, because you need to know what you're up against. With frontal temporal lobe dementia, vascular dementia, and Lewy body for that matter, there's hallucinations, there's paranoia. You have to understand that so that you know how to deal with it. Thank God there's medications that can help with that. With my mom, because she was always a little paranoid, but it enhanced because of the dementia, the hallucinations. We were able to get her onto antipsychotic medications that helped her to have a little bit more of a quality of life. Are there issues with those drugs? Yes. If you listen to the news, we now know that it can cause strokes. It can cause the person with dementia to die. But again, it comes back to what is the quality of life. And I did not want to see my mom go through some of the things that I saw that she went through. You know, I mean, I remember one time her being in the hospital and the drugs just sent her everywhere with the dementia. And she was hallucinating that my brothers were up on the roof, you know, being held captive. And my dad was up there too, and no one was taking care of them. Those are things that we deal with someone with dementia. I did not want my mom to have to continue to do that. So if she had to be on some medications that maybe it, you know, shortened her life, well, in my mother's case, she would have been okay with that because we knew that. So understanding is really important because then we can get them the proper care, get them proper medications to be able to help them through the journey for whatever time that they have left. And that's what it's all about. You know, the more information you know, the more you're going to be able to help them.
Okay, we've got a short little bit of, I think, helpful information from Deacon Cecilia Travick-Jackson next, who is going to share information both for those who are members of Mount Cross and those who are here otherwise about something that's available at Mount Cross. It's not uniquely available for people who might be in the category of what we're talking about today, but Cecilia, if you'll come and talk about the Thursday chapel that's available, it does work for sometimes people who may be a little less comfortable coming to a full hour-long Sunday. I think this would be fine for you, won't it, or not? Okay, whatever you want.
Okay, we have something called Afternoon Chapel, and it's geared towards seniors, but it's not limited to seniors. It is a shortened worship service, complete with communion. The service itself lasts about 30 minutes. The service lasts about 30 minutes. The sermons last about 7 minutes, 7 to 8 minutes. And we have full communion. You never have to stand up. We bring communion to you. All prayers are said from a sitting position, and hymns are familiar hymns. So they're hymns that you grew up with. Our bulletins are large print. And then afterwards, we have hospitality. And we take real pride in our hospitality. And it's out on the patio. The tables are set. The tables are set with tablecloths, with centerpieces, and we follow a theme. So whatever we're going to be talking about for that month, it follows through with the hospitality session. The tables are arranged so that you are sitting, you're talking to one another, you can see one another, people laugh. We don't say you have to leave at a certain time. You may sit as long as you want. What we aim for is to say, you're special, you matter, and we are glad you're here. We had something that's at Mount Cross that we said Mount Cross cares. We care about you. We care about our seniors. We have other social activities that are sponsored by Senior Adult Ministry, but not limited to Senior Adult Ministry, but they are sponsored by us. And if you have questions about it, I will be available after the session today. Thank you.
So, I think if there's anything appropriate to today, Pastor Julie's going to close us with prayer.
First, I need to say very personally, thank you, Susan. Thank you for being willing to share your journey. Thank you for being willing to share your journey for your courage. We know about this issue and so many other issues that by speaking openly and honestly, it helps to combat stigma, which is the most painful part of any illness that any of us carry. So we want to be a community that walks alongside everybody wherever they are and recognizes that everybody has something to offer us. I mean, we're not about to let Susan off any committees. All of her leadership roles, you can tell, like she can handle them. But Susan, what a gift. What a gift to all of us that you were willing to share. Jordana, as you were talking, I was thinking, knowledge is power. And you were sharing with us so clearly and also so personally, and that's also a gift. I know all of us are taking important things home and will be able to implement them because of what we heard today. And Terry Helton, you sure show us. Health ministry matters. It matters. So thank you. Mary, did you have something?
Health issues as well as Alzheimer's and dementia.
Yes, we know the hardest job in the world is caregiving. And we have a caregiver support group. Which day of the month is it, somebody? Second Wednesday of the month at 1 o'clock? 1 o'clock. And after this, there are refreshments, and I hope Jordana, Susan, Terry will be mingling, and everybody here has so much wisdom to offer one another. So please be sure to go have refreshments. I just want to take a moment. You don't have to be Lutheran to be in this place. You don't have to be Christian. We'll just take a moment to honor the courage that's in this room, to honor the memory of those that we have loved and have gone before us, those who've helped contribute to the knowledge of dementia and all the accompanying diseases, the researchers who are working to improve the lives of those who are suffering, and the communities like ours who are doing our best to be compassionate. So we'll take a minute. God, we give you thanks for the beauty of this earth, for the hope that this season of spring gives us, and for inspiring hearts here, minds here. We ask your blessing on each person, on their families, and all that they hold. And we, because she was so willing to share with us, we ask your special blessing on Susan. Lord, fill her with your strength, with your peace, and with your help. We pray in your holy name. Amen. Go in peace. Enjoy some refreshments.